Okay, so we're here in Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. Thank you, Commissioner Hanford, and to our housing team for being here to give us an overview of your work. And we'll let you jump right in.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for having us in early. And I wanted to just give a little overview of the Department of Housing and Community Development. Tell us a little bit about ourselves. We do have a little slide deck. But Josh Hanford, I've been in public service pretty much my whole career. Was in the military for 10 years and was in AmeriCorps at the same time as the military, which I've heard of no one else ever doing that.
I have to say that's a great co-appointment.
I didn't know they let you do that.
Worked in natural resource economic development work, and then came to Vermont and was involved in the community development block grant program as a grants manager for a few years, and then director of that for 10 years. And that's really where I got involved in housing funding and policy work through that program. At the time, it was our largest grant program in the department. And outside of COVID times, it still would be. And then in the end of Governor Shumlin's term, towards the end, I was appointed deputy commissioner, and then reappointed deputy commissioner under Governor Scott, and then appointed commissioner in 2019, right before the pandemic. And the sort of crisis of housing being highlighted like never before. So that's a quick little background of what I've done.
Does everyone know Senator Harrison?
We met.
Senator Harrison,
Yeah.
yes. And just quickly, maybe Alex, introduce yourself. And
can everybody hear me from back here? Is this okay?
It's not okay.
Is the microphone?
You're fine.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I'm Alex Farrell. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Housing and Community Development. Not as much tenure in this space as Josh, of course, but I started out mostly in Burlington with spending some time in their Parks, Rec, and Waterfront Commission, then their Community Development Block Grant Advisory Board for 4 years. During that time, I was working professionally in data and corporate strategy, but around 2019, I was appointed to the Real Estate Commission and then to the board for the Vermont State Housing Authority. I'm now the chair of the Vermont State Housing Authority's board. So I've been there for a few years, 4 now actually, and then I was appointed to this position as deputy commissioner summer of 2021. Yeah, summer
In
of
the
2021.
pandemic.
Yeah,
sometimes.
during the big blur that
Right,
we all
right.
remember. So anyway, so I helped Josh with the operations of the department and with some policy. So
Yes, because we don't see as much of you. I mean, we mostly see Josh and Sean.
yes, you'll see more of me now. This
Great.
has been my first session kind of in the building and getting in front of committees.
Is there any reason we'd see you more? Is it when we're in trouble or?
When Josh is like, I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah.
It's a bad time.
The division of work hasn't been entirely clear just because it's sort of been how things have fallen in our
Mhm.
lap. And so sometimes I've jumped in on a certain legislative item or budget item, other times it's been Josh, so.
yeah, and actually, Alex, on the I'll get into it in a minute, but our department has so many different divisions and historic preservation and a few others. Alex has been sort of point because it's just too much for one person to be in all the committees at the same time. And so, you'll see sort of that we'll be able to be in 2 places at once. And then Sean.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. Sean Gilpin, Housing Division Director with the Department of Housing and Community Development. I've been with the department, actually, this is my 10th year we're getting into. Crazy to think I've earned a few gray hairs as a result. But prior to that, I was actually with the CVOEO Mobile Home Program. And so I come from an advocacy background and got snatched up by the department after during our Irene recovery, after leading a couple programs at CVOEO to address those disaster response and recovery needs. And in the before times, most of my role was coordination with all of our different stakeholder agencies and organizations throughout the state. As you likely know, we have a pretty decentralized housing development network. And then since the start of the pandemic, we've expanded for the longest time. It was myself and Arthur Hamlin who ran the mobile home program, and we were the entire housing division. Now we're actually up to a team of 6.
So hiring sped up?
Yeah,
Because we had talked to-
most of which are limited service positions to
Okay.
deal with ARPA
Okay.
specific programs. So I think we have 3 permanents now, and then the rest are limited service. For the next
So you
couple
and
of
Arthur
years.
are the permanents and.
And Naomi Cunningham, actually, is
Okay.
yes, fantastic woman, has been doing great work for us for the past year, but, yeah, that's a little bit about me, and then we'll get into the programs in a second.
Sounds good.
Excellent. So yeah, as you can see, 41 staff. I remember telling you
Yeah.
had 28 staff in the
Yeah.
department. As you said, a lot of this has come with the CRF and then ARPA funding, a lot of limited service hires across the board. Historically, our department hasn't had huge grant funds to put out the door that are general fund. We run a lot of federal programs, but have never had state dollars to invest in housing development of any kind. That has changed recently, and we beefed up our staff. So next slide.
Do you have like a percentage of state dollars now by any chance?
Actually, the programs we're running for housing investment are still federal. We still don't
Okay,
have any
okay.
general fund
Okay.
dollars to invest in housing development. We have our downtown and village center tax credit program, which is tax expenditure. It does support housing, but the rest of it's all federal at this
Okay.
point. Mission, pretty broad. You could skip to the next slide. I'll be quick. So wanted to, like, when you hear these buzzwords, we're involved in these things. Designated areas, which there's 6 of them. Place-based economic and community development, the better places, zoning, bylaw modernization, mobile home parks, fair housing and anti-discrimination. We report to HUD on analysis of impediments to fair housing and coordinate the consolidated plan for all the HUD money for the whole state. We do obviously affordable housing development, historic preservation, we manage the 13 publicly accessible historic sites. We do everything from underwater preserves to mobile home parks.
Is missing middle your buzzword too?
Yes. Next slide. I think it's our partners, which are quite expensive. Yeah.
If
We
the
work
type
with-
gets tiny.
Yeah. Basically anyone that has a V in front of their name, Vermont, we work with. And so we could skip to the next slide. We wanted to give you some just program highlights. You heard some of this from Chris's presentation. I took out the Bristol picture that was in here.
All
No,
7
it
of
wasn't
them?
a Bristol picture.
It was
It was
many, I know.
Bristol pictures.
I don't know how that, but better places, new, highly successful, we have some divisions that really think out of the box and try to address the community needs in new ways that maybe we haven't done before, public-private partnerships, responding to those community needs. Downtown Village Center tax credits, you've heard about that. We've expanded into neighborhood development areas, which was a first for this year. Our flagship program, the Vermont Community Development Program, is a HUD. That's the Community Development Block Grant. Senator Leahy, one of the first bills he voted on in 1974. It had been our only source of funding to help communities with everything from affordable housing to planning to infrastructure to economic development to food shelf, you name it. But it has to go through a municipality. They're the only eligible applicants. Section is the city of Burlington because they receive their own allocation. But it's a very flexible program, but it's very complicated. It's federal in nature and it has lots of layers to it. But we have a whole team that works on this and all the audits that result and capture all the benefits. But it averages about $7 million a year. Next slide. Downtown Transportation Fund. We also manage that in partnership with agency transportation. We have our Downtown Development Board, which manages and approves applications for a whole bunch of different programs that Chris talked about. Basically, that's the board. I'm the chair of that board that has been doing good work for 20 years and lots of creative work. And that board is really representative of really everyone in the state that's involved in sort of community development work, all the different interest groups and municipal interests. And then we have historic preservation activities that includes 2 grant programs. We have the Historic Preservation Grant Program, the Barnes Grant Program. We of course have the historic sites. We receive federal funds from the Department of the Interior to run probably half of the programs in the the Division of Historic Preservation. Our sites took quite a hit during COVID. You know, they were shut down. We had reduced visitation. We depend on about half of their budget on the historic sites from sales and admission fees. And so we had to augment for certainly COVID and last year to some extent with general funds. We're hoping we get back to normal this coming summer.
Just a question on that. Laura does a great job. This is a fabulous program. All our communities appreciate the grants and the historic sites. The physical cost is not borne by you. It's borne by BGS, right?
It's most of it's in the capital bill.
Yeah. So
Yes.
so that's not part of your cost. You aren't bearing you're not keeping that in your budget. That's all in.
We are through the capital bill.
Oh, it is. So it's
Yeah.
still it's not through BGS.
No, I mean, they partner with us on it, but we actually maintain the funds and it's major maintenance is what it's used for. Which we have ongoing projects all the time to try to keep up with these sites.
Yeah.
And it's challenging in this environment to get people to even bid on the RFP with all the state sort of rules and regulations. You know, I joke that if this was owned by someone else, they would call the snowplow or the lawn mowing. They'd call 3 of them in the phone book and they'd have someone committed in 5 minutes. It takes us 5 months to put out an RFP, get the proper, they have to.
I understand that you have a new RFP proposal that's working its way through the legislature.
Several proposals.
No, I mean on how to make that a less onerous. Thank you. That's the word I'm missing.
Yeah.
Less onerous process.
Yeah, and there's a review of Bulletin 3.5 and 5.5, which governs grants and contracts, and won't bore you with that stuff, but it is a lot of work and involves a lot of people. We do a lot of transactional work with partners.
Right.
And so we have lots of grants management and compliance staff to get contracts and grants out the door. I'll talk about a little bit more of that when we get to the other initiatives on the next slide. So there's VHIP, which has been very successful for us, but it's actually not us that delivers it. It's our 5 regional home ownership centers. Those are our partners. We have grant agreements with them.
Home ownership centers. That's what I was looking
Okay.
for. Those are the
HOCs.
5 partners.
Yes.
So ADUs it's not considered a program highlight.
Well, ADUs are part of VHIP.
I know, but I mean.
Yeah, so ADUs are an eligible activity. And, on that, I mean, VHIP has been one of, if you ask AHS and some of our social service partners, we've been able to stand up units to rehouse homeless folks fast and efficiently, under $31,000 per unit average, and over about 300 families housed already that exited homelessness through VHIP. And our commitment to our AHS partners and our homeless service providers was our first priority for VHIP is going to be that. ADUs, are coming online now. We have about 24, but it really was a crisis sort of program that was piloted years ago due to folks that had vouchers trying to exit homelessness. And they would go to many apartments, the only ones being available were generally privately owned, and they wouldn't pass inspection. And so you had these homeless service providers in Bennington that we piloted this that would go to 10 apartments and they literally couldn't rent the apartment because it was out of code. So we knew small investment under $10,000 at that time could bring that unit up. You could match someone that had a voucher that was homeless into an apartment and solve a problem. And that was the genesis of VHIP before it was called VHIP.
And you've converted us, and we have been your biggest advocates in the state. So we're also very keen on the ADU program. And we'd love an update on that fully with how the homeowners, because you've sort of given it to the homeownership centers, the 5 partners, and we'd love to have an update from them and from you on it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I said, we've been slow to do that because it priority felt like serving the homeless because the ADU piece doesn't come with a homeless requirement. But we've done 24 already without really even marketing it. So the big push is coming soon on that.
Was there an application deadline this weekend?
And
Okay,
I responded to that.
thank you
Yeah.
so much. Because I didn't know if we were if there was some update of application deadline.
Yeah, no. And also
Okay.
I'll say, you'll hear, we're going to House of Popes after this to talk about the
Okay.
5 million in BAA for VHIP.
Yeah.
You know, the reality is this program has been given little hits of money
Yeah.
here and there, and we've been managing the outflow with the resources we have. But the fact is, we can spend all that we have in this fiscal year and this new 5 million and serve many more units if we don't have to stop and wait to July 1 for a new infusion. And so that's basic.
It's another BAA piece. So we need to know what you're
Okay.
asking for.
Right.
Your committee of jurisdiction needs to know what in the BAA you're
It's
asking.
5
for,
million.
Because we're your advocates for the BAA
Yeah.
also,
It's 5 million just to add to this year's existing budget for the,
for VHIP and for ADUs?
Yes.
Or, okay, so for both, but not not prescribed buckets.
right, with the existing rules and requirements of the, no policy changes, just
Okay,
we're gonna burn through the money. We have much interest in landlords, more than we, I think, thought, with the condition that you either serve people exiting homelessness, refugee families for 5 years.
Yeah.
Or you have 10 years of affordability, and we're getting constant requests, even with those conditions, so.
yeah.
I just want to flag now, because my brain works differently in my current condition. At some point, I think we'd like to talk about rental risk mitigation and
Mhm.
expanding that program. Is that you all
Yep.
as well?
No.
Not really.
Okay.
The 5 million that's in right now
Yeah.
to launch end of January. The Vermont State Housing Authority is running that program
I
with a
don't know.
grant
Okay.
from AHS.
It's for incarcerated people currently.
Okay,
Helps get them their second chance to actually be rented
for
to,
housing.
I think. Yeah.
I've been seeing this from the other end. I've been working with a woman with 2 high-risk children, one physical illness, the other just everything bad that could happen has happened in this family. To the best of my knowledge, and I've known her for 20 years, there's no addictions, alcohol. Sometimes she cuts off her nose to spite her face, but given the homeless population, she's not bad. She's finally found a home last week in a motel. She's been going through Zillow as a realtor 5 years ago. Half of what was up for rent on Zillow was a scam.
Mhm.
She's calling and trying. She's moved around, so she doesn't have a social worker or, how does one who is homeless, living
Mhm.
off a phone,
Mhm.
access the program?
Yep.
Who,
It's all through coordinated entry. She has to connect with that social worker that will enroll her,
okay, but how
and it's
does
a
she
referral
connect
basis,
with the social worker?
It's 211.
211.
She calls that regularly. They told her, thank you very much, call back on Monday. And we actually got her some gas
Where-
money.
Which
She's
location
in
is she?
Chittenden County.
Chittenden County?
The school
Yeah.
social worker got her in because the original cause was
We can get
domestic
you the
violence.
number. It's CVOEO is that.
I
organization.
sent her there
Yeah,
first.
And this has been a policy decision that all the houses have had to agree to.
Yeah.
The coordinated entry is our one place that referral, because if we shortcut that, we don't know who needs help. We don't know the number.
Okay.
And everyone has to go through coordinated entry. So there's a fair process for referring people to the housing we're creating.
Okay,
And
then I know what to tell her.
Yeah. happy to give you direct numbers and whatnot.
That's,
Yeah.
no, right now, she's in a motel, she's probably getting it. But I
Yeah.
keep telling her, don't give anybody any money on Zillow.
No.
Uh,
I mean,
I had 2 of my sale
Yeah.
listings put on Zillow, and this
Yeah.
was 10 years ago,
yeah,
as rentals.
yeah,
We're all missionaries in Africa, please send us
right.
first and last month and a deposit.
I mean, we all know sort of 3 legs to the stool, but there isn't enough units, even if we've got the other things to match
That's
up. And so, anyways, happy to talk more about VHIP, and all the intricacies throughout the session. The missing middle homeownership pilot, VHFA is running it, but what I'd like to express is there's many programs where, the funds were appropriated to us. We developed the program with VHFA. We then grant the funds and monitor. These are ARPA funds. We report back to the feds, as well as the homeownership assistance funds, which is the mortgage assistance. We play a role, that connecting role with a lot of these resources where, we don't have the staff, even at our huge housing division team of 6 now, we realize we don't have the manpower and might not be in the best position as a state entity to run these programs, but we develop them in partnership and then grant them and monitor them with our partners around the state. That's a lot of our work. And so the Missing Middle homeownership program is an example of that. Applications are open right now. I know you heard from Maura a little bit about this. What I'll tell you is it's already oversubscribed. There's already broad diversity in applications across the state, more demand than they can meet with the 15 million. So we'll see where that goes, but there's massive competition.
But
that
it's
was
not in BAA, you might see something.
yeah. Good segue there. I know one of the things that you guys talked about a little bit with Maura and interested in is data on housing. And, just wanted to mention that, part of our role every 5 years is to do the statewide housing needs assessment. That's part of what we submit to HUD to receive our federal funding each year. And the last one was completed and released right before COVID, and I don't think got much attention. But we, there's various ways you can do that and go out to a private consultant, which we did 10 years ago. The last time we did this, we contracted with VHFA. And part of that was in conjunction with a grant we provided to VHFA to create that housingdata.org. So instead of paying people separately every time to collect housing data, we wanted to start consolidating and building it with one entity so it has a lasting sort of impact. And every time a community wants to understand its housing needs, they don't have to go get a contract, put out an RFP for a consultant. And that was the genesis behind that. We've learned a lot. That's a great resource. You can really almost any town find some basic information to understand your housing needs.
Do you think they all know that? I'm going to start taking that on the road with me. So I didn't know it until we saw it.
We've tried to, and they've got the community profiles, they've got the housing commission starter kit. There's a lot of information, and in the RPCs too, like we've had to really inform them that before you ask us for a grant to sort of go study housing in your region, go scan this information first, because you can get probably 80% of it right there.
I might send it to the entire Senate, put it out on Front Porch Forum.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm finding it very helpful because some communities want to live in an anecdotal world, and you might encourage the House to start sharing it as
Absolutely.
well.
I mean, when I get calls from reporters to talk about housing, needs and all that, I'm literally on the website just giving them real-time information because it's the best source we have. Some of it's census data and it's, it's estimates, but it's the best we have and it's pretty comprehensive. So just like to remind folks that is another partnership that we've been involved in for several years.
Senator Brock, did you want to ask about the AirDNA question right now?
About
the thing we learned where you can look at 1 month rentals and the other data.
No,
Okay.
well, I mean, basically, we've been talking about the whole issue of getting information about what rentals there are available and who has it. And I know Maura did mention this tool as one that may not be absolutely accurate, but may be certainly a substitute for creating a massive rental registry, which I've always had concerns about. And I don't know if you have any perspective about that at all.
Yeah, I mean, when we were designing our contract to pay to set up housingdata.org, that was a decision point. We said, yes, we'll pay extra for the AirDNA data so we can look at short-term rental information and compare year to year, month to month, see what's happening. I bet there's more information we can dig from them if we were willing to pay more than their monthly subscription. There's probably a premium package or something, and would be happy to look at that, explore that with them. I'll also say that the Department of Travel and Tourism did a stagnant study as well but it didn't have an ongoing source to pay for that. So,
But one of the issues about stagnant studies of things like rental housing, for example, and particularly rental housing that is vacant housing or so on, the point in time at which you do the study determines the result. And if you do it at the wrong time, you'll get results that are frankly misleading. And
Yeah.
I guess I would be interested in knowing is what incremental cost would get you more information? What value of that information? What would be the return on investment of the value of that information?
Sure, we'll explore that for you. And one of the things we learned from that housing needs assessment, which was through 2019, released in 2020, and why we really pushed VHIP was that study showed us that there was about 19,000 units of housing in Vermont
Mhm.
that were substandard, out of code, and possibly vacant. So we had all this low-hanging fruit of housing reinvestment because it's much more expensive to build new. These are existing neighborhoods, so that was like, we have this housing stock that is literally falling apart. We should be investing in first. I would be very interested to see, when we have to do this housing needs assessment in a few years, how much that changes. Because there's a lot of investment going on in housing right now in Vermont, through VHIP that's ensuring it's going to affordable, rents. But there's a lot that's happening where people are buying and fixing up these homes because they're all that's left to buy, and they're, halfway affordable. And I see it in my town where around the downtown, there used to be drive down the street, you'd see a vacant house, something, they've all been bought and are being fixed up as we speak. So I bet you that statistic, that's good in one sense, because we're investing in this older housing stock, but a lot of it is no longer affordable for folks that was their only option to get
One
into
of the
that.
questions is whether or not there's any proactivity that, do we wait for the owner of the depressed house to come to us and say, we want to get some money to fix it? Or do we go out and encourage that owner who perhaps has not thought about it,
Mhm.
that this may be an opportunity?
Well, I think we're doing that with all the messaging and marketing
Well, that's
around
the
VHIP.
question is, are we? And the
Oh, yeah.
statistic will tell you whether or not that's the case.
Absolutely. And
Either
Rutland's
is or it isn't.
Rutland's taking an approach with a lot of the vacant and abandoned housing stock they have in the city, which is quite a bit.
Yeah.
And, more aggressively taking city ownership of it, because it's just doing nothing for 5-10 years. And then they're taking ownership of that. And then they're auctioning it with the condition that it's fixed within 18 months to the purchaser. And we've helped support some of those with VHIP, because it's a 5-unit apartment, and a big old Victorian home. And we've seen those units come online in those neighborhoods that without this resource, they were just sitting there and no one really had it really wouldn't cash flow, for someone without some incentive to put that type of investment and then still offer affordable rents. So that's what we're getting.
I think we'll continue, I will speak for myself. I continue to have questions to make sure we can get a more and more accurate number on how many homes are unoccupied
Mhm,
for more than 6 months of the year.
mhm.
And to think about that with our other policy changes, maybe not
Yeah.
this committee, but finance anyways.
I tell you one thing that's been very frustrating in this housing discussion is there's been, reporters, news outlets across the country that have
Mhm.
misinterpreted our vacancy rate,
Mhm.
and then they'll highlight, 30% of Vermont's homes are vacant. Well, look at Grand Isle County, look at Essex County. That rate's about 50% because they're vacation homes. They're not vacant in the sense that they are resources for us to make available as affordable housing, and they're just sitting there. They're vacation homes, and they've always had a high rate of vacancy and a high rate of vacation homes. And Vermont's second only to Maine in the percentage of vacation homes.
But our vacancy rate, we talk about our vacancy rate in Napa
Different.
Valley being less than 1%.
Right,
Right.
So,
but people are confusing those two
Yes, I keep trying
statistics.
to make sure. I
but
get this
how, you cannot even, it's impossible to guess how often a seasonal residence is used unless you're getting data from every caretaker in the state. I mean,
It's based
represent
on
Woodstock.
census data, April 1st,
Mhm.
and there's a vacation home, so it's considered vacant at that point, and it shows a high percentage.
Mhm.
That's not
I
the
see,
same as
so
a
it's
rental
just that.
vacancy rate.
Right.
Got it.
But we will have a hard time knowing if it's a weatherized property that could be year-round housing stock or not,
Right,
unless we were to change how we collect data.
yeah, and there is some data on that,
Okay.
because some of that census looks into whether it has, indoor plumbing, a year-round heat source. A lot of those, especially in Essex County, are seasonal camps.
Mhm.
It's just a fact.
Right, no, wait.
But
We're clear.
yeah, I share the interest in having as much data as possible. And I think there's ways to collect it and pay for it and use it for good policy.
We're still in that. program on the spot.
Is that is Scott doing that?
Scott.
Sorry, nobody
Sorry.
were on this one for a while.
Scott, can we advance this baby?
I think, okay, so one that's about to launch, I think a favorite of some members of this committee is our manufactured housing investment rehab program. And Sean could talk about that a little more when I'm done, but just to remind folks, we've got 4 million total. It's 2.5 million for what are small park improvements. So think abandoned home on a lot. No one else can move there until that home's removed. That's gonna take some resources. Maybe there isn't proper electric to the site. Maybe there isn't a proper place to put your fuel tank. And so this is to clean up over 350 vacant lots we know across the mobile home parks that we inventory. It's another thing our department does is we run the mobile home program. We do an annual lot registration, $12 a lot. And we know a lot about mobile home parks and vacancy. So this program was designed to address that through these 3 areas. And then small grants to the homeowner to help them fix emergency repairs, and then foundation installation with pads so they can meet new HUD standards, bring new homes on it. We also think this is low-hanging fruit. We think this money is going to go out the door immediately. We've spent some time developing the right set of partners on this. We have CVO on as a partner to do the outreach and technical assistance with all the homeowners and park owners. And then we have the Vermont State Housing Authority, which is going to manage the grants and the actual work, because they did so many mobile homes during the VRAP funding.
Yep.
We were unique in the country that we took some of that money and did emergency home repair to ensure that people didn't become homeless. And then in order to provide that emergency rental assistance, the home had to meet quality standards. So they learned a lot and repaired a lot of mobile homes and made a lot of connections. So we're excited to launch this. We're thinking early February, but all the things are lined up. Grant agreements are in the works. Everything is ready to go. And we think this is going to be a big win and a lot of leadership from you, Madam Chair, on getting this over the finish line.
What are the caps for the different grant programs now?
Certainly, excuse me. So for the park improvements, it's a $20,000 per project.
Okay.
Is the statutory cap. We're considering a particular lot to be a project. So a park owner that had multiple lots, not $20,000 per park, it's per lot essentially.
Yeah.
The pad installation. So now for new. For those who don't know, HUD somewhat recently, I guess a few years ago now, changed their regulations. So a brand new mobile manufactured home in the state, well, in the country, needs to be put on some sort of permanent foundation. Typically, that's a concrete slab. There's some other eligible uses, but more often than not, it's a concrete slab, which it's a bizarre sort of situation because it's the responsibility of the purchaser, the homeowner, to put down the slab as part of the siding of the home. But obviously, they're not going to take that away with them if they ever were to move the home. So it ends up being
part of the
park. So we're helping with grants of up to $15,000 per pad. For that service, and actually partnering with Champlain Housing Trust's down payment assistance to get that word out, because that's most of a large proportion of the new homes that are bought in the state go through that program.
So even if it's considered the responsibility of the mobile home owner, are you seeing park owners provide that service since they know that they're keeping it, or?
Well, I mean, the pad's gonna stay there
Yeah,
regardless
right.
of who pours the concrete.
I just didn't know if they're eligible, if the park
yeah.
owners are
It has to be
eligible.
matched with the home.
Yeah, it's not the
Okay.
sort of thing where you can kind of do it ahead of time and then
Yeah,
it needs to have certain specs depending on the size of the home and that
Oh.
sort of thing. And
So it's individually tailored.
It's
Yes.
tied to the individual, and that whole issue is kind of evolving, and I think engineers are getting better at making more sort of consistent situations. But so that's a resource that will provide. It's typically part of the financing, so that should drive down the cost.
okay,
The average cost for site work is usually between $5,000 and $7,000.
Okay.
So the 15,000 cap should cover pretty much everybody.
okay.
And then for
Senator
the
Harrison.
This might be, this is a dumb question, but that's just for new ones, right? You're not gonna install a pad where somebody already
Yeah.
is and have them.
Oh,
put
yes,
it
we did a
on.
ton. after Irene.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, we did.
Oh, cool.
You
On
can,
after
you
Irene.
can also, lift a home and put a pad underneath, and we suspect there'll be some of those, especially for homes that need other work, because there's no
Right.
sense in replacing windows if the home's twisting.
All right, that's great.
And
It
also
provides a
flooding.
more solid foundation, obviously.
Right.
And it less likely for a home to appreciate faster, and it's just better.
Yeah.
And homes in flood.
Right. You
Oh,
can, you
no.
can put tie downs.
That's
So we
wonderful.
did tie downs and we did pads in the mobile home parks after Irene that were in the flood zone and they wanted to
I
return.
mean, we'd be happy to come back with Arthur and Sean and give
Yeah.
the
Yeah, I
whole,
think we want.
301 of the mobile home
Yeah.
program and all
Right.
the factors of it.
Good call.
And actually, that's the floodplains is a good point, take just 5 seconds. So one of the things for park improvements that we're gonna be trying encouraging is opening up new lots outside of floodplains in parcels where that's an
Yeah.
opportunity. Speaking of, cash flow, it's obvious, it's often not, cash beneficial for a park owner to invest in doing that because lot rents by necessity and by actuality are relatively low. Just because that's the market of the affordability of those type of
What
units.
sort of rental rates are you seeing for lots right now, range?
Arthur would know the numbers right off the top of his
Yeah.
head. I think the average right now, and we'll see what happens because as you probably remember, there's not rent control in mobile home parks, but there is a mediation threshold
Right.
that's tied to the consumer price index. And as we all
Right.
know, the housing portion of that index this past year went up significantly. And so it'll be interesting to see this year how many park owners raised to I think it was 8%.
Yeah, it's gonna be a
was the
big
max.
outcry.
But that aside, right now, I wanna take a educated guess and say that the average lot rent is probably about $320 per
Yeah.
month.
I was gonna say
Across the
350,
state,
Yeah. 200, yeah.
Yeah, I think the high end is in the low 400s, and then there are still a couple parks around there that are charging like $200 a month, which obviously you're not gonna find an alternative, rental option for that amount.
Yeah.
And so that brings us to probably the most important part of this program from a constituency standpoint is the home repair. It's often difficult mobile homes can actually be repaired in many instances. I know there's sort of a mentality that they're just disposable housing. It's not the case. But we're dealing with a very low income population. And so we've actually set up, and I'm happy to share, I actually have one of my team members working on sort of a brief one pager. We have an administrative plan for this program. It's
Right.
almost set. And I'm happy to share that as well, but we can probably distill it down.
And what's the
just a
cap
few
on that?
details. So that actually is the interesting part. We're gonna have a series of tiers. We worked with CVOEO. At first, we were thinking, so the statute requires us to address, I want to say it's between 250 and 400 homes. Did a couple quick mathematical calculations, and that averages out to about $3,000 per home.
Yeah.
We were hearing from CVOEO that would cover that amount. Would cover a good proportion, but it's going to leave out some people who have some pretty serious repairs, especially when it comes to roofs.
Yeah.
And so we actually are going to have 3 tiers with different amount of applications available. The highest one being an $18,000 tier.
That's right.
And then a 5,000, and then a large number of people will be eligible for a $1,500 grant. Because in many cases, it's we need to fix the door that doesn't shut because it's causing our heating bills to go up, or put on railings or ramp, that sort of thing, just to make it maybe switch out a tub for a step-in shower for somebody who's elderly, those sort of.
Does it include things like furnace replacement?
Yes.
And
Hey,
so,
sorry, what?
Do you,
Furnace replacement.
Oh,
do you encourage heat pumps and?
We
instead of-
are working, we actually, so sort of beyond just the immediate needs of this program, because as we know, we need to, winter's here, we need to get this rolled out. And actually CVOEO, as we speak, is building a list of eligible applicants. So as soon as the application is live, they'll be putting people through the pipeline. But we've actually been having conversations with both the weatherization folks at the Office of Economic Opportunity and actually USDA Rural Development, which has some low interest loans. They have a lot more strings attached to them and have to be used in eligible parks, which need to go through a bunch of hoops. Largely, that's our nonprofit parks in the state are the ones that are eligible. That's not to say a for-profit park couldn't become eligible for USDA investment, but rarely do they. So we're actually talking with those two groups about this program now and the future of a repair program like this that would be able to grade some of those a little bit better. And actually the same team member who's working on that one pager is putting together what I'm sure we'll get some chuckles when we're next in front of you, a flow chart of how somebody actually has to move through all of the different resources that are available for mobile homes through the various different programs. As a first step for us to figure out a way to better collaborate and grade those so that when somebody calls us for a home repair, we can say, why don't we get the asbestos tiles out of there while you're fixing up the bathroom so that weatherization can come in and do their work on the rest of it.
So
And
pre-repair assessment.
exactly, because a lot of times weatherization comes into a mobile home and the big things are asbestos, also sometimes vermiculite installation, and they're not, because of some of their regulations, they're often not able to do the remediation work that is needed in order for them to do weatherization. So that can really bump up with people. So we're hoping that this program can assist with some of that, and then, you know, hope if there are future iterations, we'll have a better, more organized system of care.
Yeah, one thing that was frustrating is, you know, why we set up this home repair with those tiers is we want to have a low barrier to help people that need something. They need $1,000 fix right now. And there's been some of these programs in existence for decades, but they're just too complicated for people to get through. And so they just don't get the work done. Just further disrepair, further hardship. And we feel if we can get them started with some repairs, get some technical assistance, get some people working with them, then those bigger things with those more complicated federal programs can start to be added on once we've got in the door and help them.
So any repair quickly is a challenge right now in this environment. So are you working with some home repair nonprofits that actually can do it fast?
Frankly, even the home ownership centers doing the nonprofit repairs are having the same struggles, but we
Yeah.
are
I was
trying
gonna say,
we are trying to coordinate as best we can. And this is ARPA funding. So we have a little bit of a tail, you know, although as Commissioner Hanford mentioned, I suspect we're going to have applications for more than $750,000 before a month is out on once this program opens up, which we're shooting for the week of February 6th. Everything's
yeah, it's going to be, until you roll it out and we know what the need, you know, what the take-up rate is, we aren't going to be able to ask for more in the budget.
And that's part of why we're partnering with CBOEO to do the level of data collection, and not just counting noses, but actually getting a feel for, okay, you say that, you know, the window needs repair, but does that mean you also have a mold problem and you should probably get, you know, new drywall? Because a lot of times people are so focused on the absolute immediate need and not necessarily thinking of the holistic view. And I think we're going to get a much better sense of what the need is out there, because this is, you know, as it's kind of been alluded to, for historically, this has been a pretty, if not forgotten, certainly
Underserved
population of folks of naturally occurring affordable housing. And these are homeowners that by and large want the independence of owning their own four walls, is a phrase that you will hear if you go around the mobile home parks a lot. So the glitzy developer pictures of, look at this nice 20 unit apartment building that we could put here, is a no-go for most of the folks who live in some of these parks. I know that Windermere Mobile Home Park comes to mind, that was owned by HFI, and they tried to do a nice new redevelopment, and all the owners, even though they're in there like sardines, said heck no to being in an apartment building. I want my own four walls, even if I can reach through my window and get sugar from my neighbor.
Which is, and as we know, this is, given the pressure and the cost of housing, this is increasingly our affordable option for people.
So I see your next slide is the last one. I want to make sure I remind all of us that what the interplay is when we get to supportive and transitional housing, as people look to build SROs or kind of winter shelters and build contracts in for pods or other, I might maybe better solutions that are last for winter. Are you involved in any of that at all?
indirectly, you know, a lot of our funding did not have that statutory use for us. We had VHIP.
Yeah.
And then these programs that we transferred to VHFA, Vermont Student Housing Authority, none of our funding really had that. That's mainly the HCB's
Okay. Yeah.
sort of ball game right now
That's
with a lot of funding in there.
Perpetual housing,
Yeah.
not even perpetual.
Yeah.
Perpetual.
But we
Perpetual
do
housing.
have some unique programs, and this slide sort of identifies it. One, we've got the VHIP numbers here, where 383 are done. We've got 408 total, because some of those are under construction, and dozens in the pipeline.
Mhm.
But one of our unique programs is the recovery housing program.
Yeah.
This is a federal source, comes on sort of on top of our CDBG program. We have to do a new action plan each year. And we're the first state in the country to get this money out the door. It's meant for folks with, you know, addiction. And we've done the Barry Recovery Residence, the Foundation House is the first one to open. We've funded another one in Colchester and then 2 in Bennington. And so, you know, this is hard to say. I don't want this money to come, but I think it will, because
Yeah.
it's based on our opioid overdose rate. And so, you know, we're filling in a very challenging need here.
Right.
And we've learned a lot through this process, and we have a team that's sort of specializing, understanding what HUD wants here. And we had to really give some tough feedback to HUD, because, you know, the Berry project, it was meant for women with children. There wasn't a place like this in all of central Vermont, but that's where the need was, from all the experts, from the police chief. And HUD was telling us we can't do that. It's against fair housing, because you can't discriminate by gender.
Mhm.
It's like, well, this is a need. Okay, let's not call it housing. This is called, you know, something else, you know, public service. And so we've sort of tried to get them to understand that if we're going to serve a population with very specific needs, we have to have some different rules. We also can't use low-income housing tax credits for recovery housing, because you can't have a long-term lease. So there's some very specific lessons we've learned and have been piloting with that program. Better Places, 18 projects, you've heard about that. You know, just last year we leveraged $231 million with our CDBG program and the others. And then this number over here, this big number, 4,976 housing units created or preserved since 2020. So, you know, that's mainly our CDBG dollars. VHIP's in there. But what we do is we also participate in the same low-income housing tax credit projects that VHFA funds and VHCB, but we also do our home repair program, which is our largest number, over 150 units per year, and some of those are mobile homes. We do that through the 5 homeownership centers again, and this is a largely low-interest loan, sometimes grant, that we help low-income homeowners that are unbankable. Keeping their home from falling apart and exiting into homelessness, being foreclosed, roofs, windows. And like I said, we do about 150 of those a year, and some of them are mobile homes. And sometimes the repair is, we need a new home, because it's $30,000 worth of repairs, and you can buy a good used home for $40,000. So we have an insight into this. And some of these are mobile home parks that we've invested in the whole mobile home park and preventing it from closing. We've gotten 100 units there. And so we often have a role in lots of housing in a different way than some of our other housing partners. But that's really the end of our short presentation. So I know we're getting near the end.
A couple of minutes, and I think everyone does need hit the real 10-minute break or so.
So the 4,976 units in 2000, that's over 12. Oh, it's 2020, I'm sorry. I was gonna say, I wouldn't be so excited about that. That is only 414 units a year.
Yeah.
That's not so great.
Well, I mean, I think it's recognizable. We're producing 3 times the number of affordable housing units each year than pre-pandemic.
Oh.
Pre-pandemic, we were only producing
2020
about
is a much
200
happier
units a
number
year.
for me.
So we can also finish offline, any
Yeah.
side conversations.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure you know we're tackling a housing bill first.
Yep.
So we will spend them in January and maybe even a little bit of February on that. And we hope to have you as partners regularly as we work through that. Workforce comes next, and we know that workforce and housing kind of go hand in hand. We need a housing workforce as well. So if you have any ideas you want to share with us in February on that front as well, please do. Since you are talking to your partners in ACCG all the time.
Yeah.
But we will continue to be in touch and come to you if we have questions and needs. And we appreciate all your work. We know that housing is finally getting its moment where this crisis has been ongoing, but it's being recognized as the top priority. So thanks for being on our.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one final word I'll say, and Senator Harrison heard me say this last night, I want to say this last night at the housing briefing. You know, we've invested historic amounts in housing, right? Almost $500 million since 2020. And we hope we're gonna produce 4,000 new units with that fund. We need 10,000. It's obvious
I
that
think
our
we need
public.
30,000.
Yeah, by 2030,
Yeah.
but it's obvious that our public investments alone aren't gonna get us those numbers.
Yeah.
We need to change the foundational problems that we've created that make housing so hard to build. And that's the land use, that's those reforms that make all of the work that all of us do, as Gus walks in, more efficient and builds more housing and allows that to happen into the future. And so I think that is the one of the most important things we should use this moment to do this year.
We hear you. It's the clarion call.
Yeah.
We've said to our colleagues, you know, it's not as politically, I mean, it's not as financially expensive, it's the political cost, you
Lots
know,
of political costs.
but it isn't gonna suck out of the budget, so it's really important that we do that, so.
Well,
Make our investment.
we've done the money, and now we're building it.
Yeah. So thank you all.
Thank
and
you.
we'll stay in
Thank
touch.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Gus, you may know we have a 10-minute break.
That's fine.
People need breaks, so.
He says, "Where you